Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lawyer Interviews. I am your host, Jeff Dillon. Today's episode, we have a very exciting guest. His name is Ruben Limonjyan. He is an employment attorney in Glendale, California. Ruben owns his own law firm. And before we hear from Ruben, I am going to read off that today's Lawyers Interviews is being sponsored by the team at Law TJIC and Select America's Legal Elite in Media. Now, Ruben, great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't I just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Well, it's nice to meet you as well, Jeff, and thank you for having me here today. Certainly look forward to the discussion. Putting me right on the spot, I guess we could delve right into it. I am an employment attorney. The firm handles labor and employment. So we specialize, in other words. And I found that early on, even in law school, when I've clerked at different places, that in my opinion, it's better to specialize in something than do everything kind of under the sun, because at that point, you know what your area of the law and you know how to approach it correctly. And going back to what I said, we do labor and employment, and that kind of falls into two different categories. As part of the firm does workers' compensation claims, which is actually newer. We started doing that this year, at the beginning of this year. But predominantly, we focus on employment discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and ultimately wrongful termination claims. Majority of what I've been doing lately and what I've been concentrating on lately is sexual harassment claims at work, and especially pregnancy discrimination cases at work, along with disability discrimination. So kind of going into some of these areas of the law, we're concerned with discriminatory acts at work. And when somebody gets into that place, they don't know what to do. I mean, what do? Do you go and tell your supervisor? A lot of people are afraid that if you tell HR or supervisor, now they're going to look at you weird and look at you differently. Maybe you're an issue now at work and that's what you're thinking, and that's why you're afraid to speak up. But we all have a voice, and that's one thing that people really need to know, is that they have a voice to speak up about the issues that are going on. And a lot of times it's hard to do. I mean, if I was not an attorney, I'd probably have a hard time going to HR and saying, hey, I have a problem. I'd rather keep my mouth shut and have my job and put food on the table than kind of getting myself into things, if you will. So that's kind of the big picture of what we do.
Right. Very good. And it seems like you're you're a compassionate person, Ruben, to be involved in this area of the law, and that you have a good handle on the different areas that are encompassed with labor and employment. First of all, do you remind us, what was the name of your law firm?
Sure. My last name, it's Limonjyan Law Group.
Okay.
And yes, thank you. I do have a lot of compassion for employees. I mean, my parents are working class people. A lot of people around me are working class people, family and friends, and not so many people are business owners, you know. And just to clarify as well, we practice labor and employment on the plaintiff side, meaning we help employees, workers, and unfortunately not the employers. But I do have some colleagues that do handle that part, and that is also a part of it. I mean, you have to help employers from getting hit too hard. If quite honestly, it's not necessarily their fault, because if you think about it, when you're a business owner and you start getting so big, I mean, what do? You're going to have some bad apples, some bad managers, supervisors that are going to do things that you were just not aware of. And at that point in time, it's your business and you get hit. And it is the job of the defense attorney to help the person that really didn't do anything wrong to figure out how they can minimize the damages that their employees really did.
Ruben, you're doing a good job advocating on the other side here. So it's good to see that you got an understanding of what you're up against. Taking a step back, what made you want to start your own law firm? And maybe also what got you interested in doing employment law?
So starting off, I suppose what got me into doing employment law. I started doing this in law school, actually, as a law clerk. Prior to employment law, I did immigration law. My first year summer clerkship was at an immigration law firm. And quite honestly, I really didn't like it because it was very administrative. It wasn't what you'd see on TV where you go to court, you argue your position, write briefs, what they teach you in law school for the most part. And then my second year of law school, it was time to get a clerkship part-time, and that's what I did. Is I found, quite honestly, I stumbled into it. I got lucky. A labor and employment law firm in Beverly Hills, a small boutique place that I started working there, and I liked what they were doing. I mean, they were helping people. Outside of your health and your family's health. I mean, at least that's the way I look at it. What's the most important thing is, well, earning money, because without money, you technically can't live for the most part. I mean, how do you afford things? It's by earning money. So when somebody loses their livelihood, it hurts, and they're in a really bad place. And a lot of people suffer emotional distress, really, like, and people are in a really bad place. Imagine losing your job and you have no income, and you're gonna possibly spiral down in the place where you don't want to be, and that happens to a lot of people. So there, I realized how it's such a, on a selfish level, such a good feeling helping people that have been wrongfully terminated, harassed, retaliated, all those things that ultimately end up in a termination. And when you see on their face this feeling of redemption, that not only, it's not really necessarily about the money, it is a lot of times where it helps people get back to where they were or close to, but it's also the feeling of, well, you know what? Now I have a feeling that my employer did do something wrong because we resolved this claim and it wasn't just thrown out. So that's how I stumbled into employment law, quite honestly, by chance. And after that, I started taking a lot of employment classes at school, in law school, and I just liked it so much. It just kept going. And my first job out of law school was actually at NBC Universal's employment law group. That was my first job out of law school. And that's kind of how I know what happens on the defense side, is working there and helping all of these managers, because I mean, NBC Universal is huge, and they actually do a really good job. They have a really good HR department, and they have a huge in-house council where it's made up of several vice presidents and several presidents, and they do a really good job. And that's where I learned what a good company really does and how it handles issues. But not all companies are that sophisticated, and even sophisticated companies make mistakes. I mean, if somebody is a bad apple and goes and sexually harasses somebody, there's only so many sexual harassment trainings you could really do to tell them don't do it, really. So that's how I delved into employment law. And to say why I opened up my own practice is, it's kind of tough, because the place where I worked at after NBC Universal was a plaintiff side employment law firm. They did workers' comp as well. I mean, it was a nice place. It was a great place. Like, the people there were great. The founding partners were great guys. Really knew what they were doing. My supervising partner was, in my opinion, is really a good guy. Worked really hard, and lately he's really blown up. So kudos to them. I'm really happy for them. But for me, I wanted to do things kind of my way. I didn't steer too much off from what they were doing, but I wanted to add my own pizzazz, if you will, into the practice, and have something to leave for my kids, if you will. I really want this to be a family practice eventually, where my kids, I mean, they could do what they want, but if they choose to do this, it'd be wonderful to have a family business going into the future. And that's one big reason why I opened it. Is first, I want to have my own input on how I do the cases. And second, it's a long-term thing for me as well, where I do want to build this and have this as a family practice, and eventually have much more associates down the line.
So at what point did you feel that you had the expertise, that you were confident and ready to start your own practice?
You never know. There is really no one point. You always are not necessarily doubting yourself. I feel like I'm a pretty confident person, but even me, as somebody who thinks of himself as a confident person, you always have these nervous feelings like, am I doing the right thing? Am I ready? When are you ready? I mean, it's such an arbitrary feeling that it's really hard to pinpoint when you're ready. For me, it was just, you know what, let's do it type of situation. I mean, I've done a whole bunch of depositions, taken depositions, defended depositions, court hearings nonstop. A lot of briefs were done, mediation. So a lot of litigation work I have done. And at that point, I've worked up one case fully to trial. So that's when I thought to myself, well, look, I mean, it's time to do it on my own.
Mm,
I think I'm ready. You never are certain because you always have so many questions because there's so much to learn. I'm still learning. There are new things that always come up, and you can only make yourself better by continuing learning and really getting down. Even though it's one specific area of the law, employment law, but it's so vast, and you really want to be so good at it and know it so well, so that when people call, you don't have to say, "Hey, look, let me look this up," but you could say, "I know this" in your head and say, "Hey, this is how
mm.
we can help you."
That's right. Yeah, as lawyers, we are continuous students. And really never stops. Keeping on top of the basically the news and also your case law in your case. Um, so Ruben, I guess also what you decided to go off on your own. You wanted to start your own firm. What about your practice are you doing differently? What's your pizzazz, as you were saying, about your firm versus the one that you were trained at and came from?
I'm gonna say what I think is my pizzazz. I don't want to compare myself to my previous firm. I have nothing but good things to say about them, really. But what I think that separates us is I think of myself as a pretty nice guy. I mean, my clients really do. I mean, I really take, to me, it's really important that my clients like me. At the same time, I could care less what people think about me in a way. I mean, reputation is everything. That I can't really say that wholeheartedly, but at the same time, you know what? If I did what I think is right and people aren't happy with me, it is what it is. That's just that person's problem. But I mean, reputation is huge, especially in this line of work. It's a very small community, employment law. Um, but it is important to me that my clients like me. And what I mean by that is that I am receptive to my clients. I care for what their situation is. I don't just look at them as just another name in my client book. That I pick up their phone calls. That's another huge one. Is that um, I am available to my clients, and I take the word counselor really to heart. We're not just attorneys that go into court for the clients. We're there to counsel them. So like if someone is feeling off or something is going on in their life, I'm not talking about personal things, but as it relates to their case and they're just worried and they want to talk to you, when you're their attorney, I mean, I know attorneys that don't respond for weeks. Or best case scenario, they'll have their assistant call back. But I don't do that. I actually call my clients, and I call my clients within 24 hours. And the reason why I say 24 hours is because I may be in a deposition or a mediation. I physically just cannot call them. But I do try to call back the same day. If someone has something on their shoulders, on their heart, like that's what people hire me for, is to really make them whole and make the process for them much easier and not have to even worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what separates me. I kind of like to think of myself as this quasi, goodness gracious, what is that word? A lot of doctors are this, where they're on call, on demand, if you will. Um, that's fine. I can't recall the word, but I like to think of myself as very, very available to my clients. Um,
Yeah.
so I
Well,
think that's what separates me.
very good. Yeah, no, responsiveness is always valued by anyone, especially uh, when you need your lawyer. I mean, that's and there's an anxiety that goes around with clients when they don't hear back, even if you're working on something. I'm sure it's very comforting to know that you're available and that you're looking into their issues. You were talking about your different areas of expertise, and you mentioned that you are recently getting more involved in pregnancy cases.
Correct.
How did you fall? How did you start developing that kind of expertise?
Uh, it, Trial and error, if you will. Sometimes the cases that come in, you don't really know much about them, but then you start doing so much research that you kind of become an expert in it, if you will. I mean, we are experts as professional attorneys, but there are specific areas, like you said, and pregnancy just has a special place in my heart. I mean, my wife, bless her soul, she's was pregnant with three kids, and we have three kids within a 3.5 year difference. So I know how hard it is to be pregnant and being a working mom. I mean, not personally, but just seeing in my literally my household with my wife. I mean, my wife was lucky; she worked for a really great company where it was not an issue at all. And like I thought to myself so many times, if this was not a company where it was not an issue, and they gave her a hard time, this would have been a situation where your pregnancy starts becoming sour and unpleasant because you have this in the back of your mind where your employer is not happy with you being pregnant, or not having worrying about not having a job after you come back from your pregnancy leave or baby bonding time. Those are scary feelings. I mean, you know that you're going to come back to something because the law states that you're going to come back to something. But when an employer takes advantage of you and they say, hey, you know what, on to the next one, if you will, on to the next employee, um, I could imagine how scary that would be for somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck, which is largely most of us. We're all largely living paycheck to paycheck. When I say that, I mean, yes, certainly some people put something aside, but they're still kind of, you know, paycheck to paycheck, if you will. So, and quite honestly, I mean, pregnant women are one of the most vulnerable groups if you really think about it, because it's not just them as being a protected person. I mean, women are a protected category, gender. But when you also have this weight, and I've seen what my wife went through, it's not easy to go through a pregnancy. I could only imagine. I don't think most men will be able to do it. Women have this special, I guess, power to do this, but it's such a difficult process. I mean, it's a beautiful process, but it's also such a difficult process. Um,
So
and being
you
taken
had an
advantage of.
initial case with I'm assuming a client who was pregnant, and then you were referred to another one, and then were able to build a reputation in your area.
Something along those lines, where you start learning and you start knowing how to do those cases. I mean, my second or third pregnancy case, I was able to get a really good result for my client, and it was there where I learned, well, you know what, this is a not only is it lucrative for the company and for the firm, but it's also lucrative for the client, where they can be put in a place where they should have been, and for what they suffered to be uh, made whole, if you will. So going to that, I mean, women shouldn't be taken advantage of, first of all, and second of all, especially when they're pregnant. It's such a going back to what I was saying, such a sensitive time for someone, and to have to go through all those emotions in addition to the pregnancy is just not fair. And that's one of the reasons why I started advocating more and more and started actually advertising more and more for pregnancy discrimination cases, because I feel like I have a pretty darn good take on how it works. And I've come to realize that a lot of even human resources departments don't really know how it works, because there's a woman is entitled to 29 and 1/3 weeks off up to for a pregnancy if she's worked somewhere for a year. So a lot of people, companies don't know that, or at a very minimum 20 weeks if she's worked somewhere for a year and there's been at least 5 employees, at least 1,250 hours. I'm going to get technical, but a lot of
Yeah.
employers don't know that. They just think, oh, okay, well, you could go give your birth and come back. But they don't know the amount of time that a woman is guaranteed to return to work. And quite honestly, well, not quite honestly, but in fact, men are also protected. It's something that a lot of people don't know, is that if a man has a child, meaning the wife gave birth, and the male partner has just a newborn, and if they worked somewhere again for at least 1,250 hours in 1 year with at least 5 employees in California, they could actually take 12 weeks off for baby bonding time.
Hmm.
So men are also in that are kind of thrown into that category where they could take time off. So
Yeah. And especially, I mean, you know about this pretty well, and in your own experience, you're preparing your children to take over a brand new law firm that they don't even know about yet. That so it's definitely an important topic, and it's nice to that you fell into this and you're so passionate about it. Your what else we'd like to hear about is, what would you say are some of like the greatest challenges coming up for in the employment law area for maybe your clients or for your firm, specific to your group, specific to California? What are some lately? What are maybe some new developments, some new challenges that you're facing?
Well, kind of touching up on that whole my kids taking over. I don't know if that's gonna be a reality. It's just my a dream as a dad, but gotta support your kids, which whatever way they go. But it's just
Hey,
my
Ruben's
my
kids, when you're
selfish dream.
watching this, no pressure. You can do whatever you want to do and be whoever you want to be. But if you're going to be a lawyer, you can take over a law firm. That sounds nice. I didn't have that opportunity, so
Neither did
go
I.
for it.
I'm gonna show this to them in about 15 years.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. They're that close to law school, huh?
5, 3, and 1.5. So not so close, but 15 years from now, I think it'll be a good time to show this.
Okay, yeah, maybe start LSAT prep in 2-3 years.
Yeah,
It's never too
exactly.
early.
But in terms of challenges, going back to your question, um, there are challenges now, but it's more of the stuff that I actually don't handle. I don't handle class action cases, and there are challenges now as it relates to class action cases and people or workers rather that sign arbitration agreements with a class action waiver. Before, it was a situation where they could still file what is called a pocket claim, and now they can't. Um, there are a lot of loopholes now to have to go through in order for that to be achieved. So that's one challenge, but it's not something that I do. I like to do individual cases where I help specific individuals as opposed to doing a class action, which a lot of my colleagues do, and I refer those out. But I get a much greater sense of achievement that I did something right for someone when it's one specific person's situation. But overall, California is the most employee-friendly state, actually. I mean, the amount of laws that protect California workers, it's tenfold to the second most employee-friendly state. It really is. I mean, a lot of employers are actually moving out of California because they just don't want to abide by the California laws because they're so stringent. For example, that law that I kept saying 1,250 hours, at least 5 employees, for at least a year. That just came into effect 2 years ago, which is called the California Family Rights Act. Prior to that, it was the same as the federal counterpart, which is the FMLA. A lot of people hear FMLA, the Federal Medical Leave Act, and for that, it has to be at least 50 employees within a 75-mile radius. So you can imagine how now so many more companies are affected by this law that you have 12 weeks off guaranteed for a serious health condition, and among other things such as baby bonding time, where now it's 5 or more employees company instead of 50 or more employees. That's a huge difference in company size. So yes, California is very employee friendly, and we're here to enforce those rights for employees who are taken advantage of by employers.
Very good. What are some other areas? I know you also have a whistleblower expert practice area. Um, is that a robust part of your practice? It seems very topical and interesting these days.
It actually is. It's not only, in addition to whistleblower, we do handle a lot of disability discrimination cases where people are taken advantage of. They're disabled. A lot of times it has to do with them having either to take a medical leave of absence or come back to work with restrictions or just given restrictions, and the employer doesn't want to accommodate. We also do sexual harassment. I feel because of COVID, it's gone down in numbers just because people aren't really interacting how they used to, especially during the time where everybody was furloughed. I mean, can't really technically sexual harass someone unless you go do it through text messages. But even then, I feel like people were so disconnected that a lot of those cases during that time kind of went away, I feel. But now that things are going back to normal, it's coming back.
Hmm.
And going back to whistleblower retaliation, yeah, it's actually a rather robust part of our practice. I just settled 2 of those cases this week, whistleblower retaliation. And what that is if you make a report or a complaint either to a governmental entity, state, county, city, or to a higher up at the company, like even the manager level employee, that you believe in good faith. It actually doesn't have to be necessarily illegal, but you believe in good faith, and a reasonable person would believe that something is being done that's unlawful or illegal.
Mhm.
For example, if you feel like you're not getting paid correctly, you're getting, let's say $15 an hour is the minimum wage at a company over 26 employees. You're getting paid $12 an hour, and you make a complaint and say, hey, look, I believe this is a violation. I'm not getting paid the minimum wage, and you get terminated. That's whistleblower retaliation, and it carries pretty much the same effect as discrimination and retaliation cases, where you're going to be entitled to lost wages and non-economic damages, which is emotional distress and the like. Um, the case that I had recently, I'm not going to mention anything that would, it's confidential, but there was a case where someone made a complaint to OSHA about unsafe working conditions after they made complaints to their employer. And lo and behold, a month and a half later, they're fired. That's a whistleblower retaliation claim, because a managerial level employee was forcing someone to do something that was unsafe at work at a construction company, and they were fired as a result. Whistleblower retaliation. So those are the other three that we really do concentrate on. We do everything really on that single plane of wage and hour stuff as well, if somebody wasn't paid correctly. But largely the ones that we really concentrate on, and it just so happens that it happens more often than others, are disability discrimination cases, which include pregnancy discrimination, because at times a woman may be disabled by her pregnancy. Whistleblower retaliation cases, sexual harassment cases. So those really are the big ones that we concentrate on.
I see. Yeah. Well, Ruben, it would appear to me that you would be anyone who needs your help would be lucky to find you as their attorney. You seem to be not only knowledgeable, but very caring and passionate about serving your clients. So as we wrap up here, how can people find you, find your firm? Yeah, that how can we find you? Where can we find your information at?
So my information is the following. I have a website that people can visit, and if they feel uncomfortable first reaching out to us, although we're very nice out here, they can actually go on our website. Is www.lawgroup.com. So lawgroupla.com. Or they could call us directly at 213-277-7444. Again, 213-277-7444. And we have intake specialists on standby to take down all of the basic information, which then gets transferred to me for a further consult, or to my colleague for workers' compensation for a further consult. But that's the best way to reach. And, going back to what I said earlier on in this podcast, that although people are afraid, they should know that they have a voice, and they shouldn't be taken advantage of. And by calling, it's first of all confidential. There is a prospective attorney-client privilege, and we cannot disclose any of the information that they provide to anybody else. Everything is confidential. So at the very minimum, a consultation as to what their rights are, I think should be very beneficial to anyone who's going through something.
Very good. And you're in the Glendale, California area?
We're in Glendale, California. We do serve the entire state of California, but we prefer sticking more to Southern California, to Los Angeles County and the surrounding counties. I'm a little bit old school. I do like to meet with my clients at the very minimum the first time when they retain us. But Zoom did upgrade my ability, so now, if need be, we do schedule Zoom consultations. So, there are definitely more options now but I do like to meet with my clients.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Ruben. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor, LawTegic, and Select America's Legal Elite in Media. Connect with LawTegic for custom, innovative, and disruptive branding, solutions to accelerate lawyer and law firm authority, grow six-figure practices, and aid access to justice. I'm Jeff Dillon. Thank you very much.